The thing that seems to escape the grasp of most guitar players that makes a key difference in their solos is outlining chord changes. Nothing screams professional sounding solo like outlining changes. There's only two things that you really need to start incorporating in your playing to start outlining the chord changes, and that is leading tones and arpeggios. That's it. Now, contrary to popular belief, neither of these ideas really have to be difficult to play. I mean, you can make them difficult to play, like the whole sweep picking arpeggios thing, but you can just play an arpeggio. I mean, you got to make it a little more musical than that in your solos, but that's it. It's just, that's a G major, and it's right out of the chord too. The only note that isn't played in the chord that's played in that arpeggio is the third, which is your B. But like I said, they don't have to be difficult, but it's not to say that you can't make them difficult, like with all the sweep picking and everything. If you don't make them difficult, I'd say they're one of the most easy ways to really get into musical sounding solos. I mean, unless, of course, you count mindless pentatonic licks, but we're not going to count those. All it takes to really start incorporating arpeggios and leading tones into your playing is learning shapes. And we've been doing that since we were born, so should be pretty easy. So for this lesson, we'll just use a 4-1-5 chord progression. And if you don't know what that is, go check out this video. So this is a pretty popular chord progression in country songs. And you can hear it being used in I'm Gonna Miss Her by Brad Paisley, and the verse sections in Mirror Mirror by Diamond Rio. And we're gonna be in the key of G for this video. So that means the 4 is gonna be your C major, your 1 is gonna be your G, and your 5 is going to be your D major, or D dominant 7. So if you weren't outlining the chord changes and using leading tones, you could just play the C major scale whenever it's on C major, and then the G major scale when it goes to G major, and then the D major scale whenever it goes to D major. But that's not really outlining the chord changes. I mean, I guess kinda, but it doesn't sound the same as if you really get into it and dive deep. So that's what we're going to do. Also, if you just place the C major scale or the D major scale over a chord progression in the key of G major, there's going to be some notes in there that aren't the prettiest. Like, so that's your key, G major, right? So if you play the scale of D major, you're going to have this C sharp note in there, which is not in the G major scale. So that's the G major scale, and then if you play the D major scale, it's going to include, which that's a different mode, but we're not going to get into that. And then if you play the C major scale, that includes your F note, which that is also not in the G major scale. The G major scale includes the F sharp note. So, what you need to do to start actually outlining the chord changes is not play the scale to the corresponding chord, but play the arpeggio to the corresponding chord. So, if you're in the key of G major, your 4 being C is a major chord, right? So you're going to play your C major arpeggio. All a major arpeggio is a 1-3-5. So that means you're acting like your C is now your root, and then you count up 1, 2, 3. So you're going to play 1, 3, 4, 5, 1, 3, 5, and then it just repeats 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 1, 3, 5. So now if you play just the 1, 3, 5 of your C major, those are all notes that are also in your G major scale. So it's kind of going to flow a little bit better, and it's not going to have this weird, like a weird flatted 7th that you don't want in there. And you'll do the same for your G major chord. And then for your D major chord, you're going to do the same thing too. But then you're also going to add your flatted 7th. So what that means is, of course, you count up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. But instead of hitting your normal 7, which is a C sharp, you're going to hit a flatted 7th, which is your C. If you notice, that gives it a dominant 7 tonality instead of just a major tonality. So if you just play these arpeggios over your chord progression, that's really going to be your safest bet on soloing over it and starting to outline the chord changes. If you wanted to get out of these notes just a little bit but still be relatively safe, you can go ahead and play all the G major scale over any of these chords, because your key is still G major. Now, as long as you're staying in these safe boundaries, just make sure that you're still outlining the arpeggios and hitting a little harder on those whenever the chord change happens. Like your chord progression is C major, G major, and then D dominant 7. So once you've got it back in track, it doesn't necessarily have to be a 4-1-5 part chord progression, but once you got it back in track and got used to playing arpeggios all over the neck, so once you got used to soloing with those arpeggios a little bit and kind of experimenting and playing around with it and coming up with different melodies, you can start to use leading tones to really outline the chord changes. And instead of just outlining the chords, you're outlining the changes as well. So I will say though, these are a little more tricky because some of the main leading tones that you can use don't actually fall in the root scale, but some of them do fall in the scale, so those are a little more easy to grasp. You just got to know when to hit them in what context. So for example, remember that flatted 7th that I told you to hit over a D major chord earlier? That note, well, that note is a leading tone, because if you've watched my leading tone video where I explain what they are, if you remember, they're just a half step above or below a chord tone that you're going to. If you hit the D dominant 7, it's a half step above the major third of your G major chord. So you make sure you outline that dominant 7 sound, and then it pulls your ear back towards your G major. It's almost like it's leading you somewhere. So I'll give you a few more examples of leading tones. If you're going from your 1 to your 4, so in this case a G major to a C major, you can do the same dominant 7 trick again. So G major, turn it into a G dominant 7, and it's leading into the major third of your C. And then if you want to go from your 4 to your 1, make your C major a C minor by flatting your third. That'll lead back to your 1 because it's a leading tone for the 5. So leading tones really are all about just ear training and listening to the music and figuring out what will lead you somewhere. So there's the ones that I showed you just now, which are more chord based, or you can use ones that are just chromatic based, which just means, you know, chromatic scale. So like if you're going from your 4 to your 5, of course those are a whole step apart, so that leaves only one note in between, so you go. Just don't use too many chromatic leading tones, because unless you are really good at it and really tasteful, it can start to sound muddy and confusing and not really clear of where you're going. But if you want to make your solos as clear as possible and catchier than ever, check out this video. Check out this video right here. It's right there. Right there. Yep, that's it. Just click on that box. Alright, bye. Thanks for watching.